Your dad's got a doctorate in engineering. What are you doing this for your dad? Mr. Polly, and he ended up changing back to the names, but I thought maybe he didn't go to Boston. Yeah. When you're, how are you gonna feel when you get to the 6 week? Yeah. I think try to check in with more of the holidays. Food festival. And
Yeah.
why don't we beg off and I'll see you in a couple of days. 2 days later, the whole house tested.
Yeah.
COVID. How you guys doing? We knocked on the door, we dropped some kids. And there was my friend Ron, he's like, we didn't remember how do you think everybody's isolated in the bed? And in case of the last one, chest box. We got the first one in the brain.
The other one had children for Christmas, everyone got something.
Like the grandsons, he got pneumonia.
Yeah.
And a week, 10 days later, he got hit with COVID for the first time. It was finally in different.
Yeah.
He was, he had 106. When we came down, I saw him 2 days later because it was on, like on a video call. He was running around. It's funny. Yeah, they thought I was gonna. Oh, like, how are you guys?
One of them is good.
Yeah, no, his brother's 6 months old, so they're all. Where did we go? What's going to happen next? I haven't heard back, so these are the things. Wow, which is good. I feel it's really strange with the planner because it's for some. When the infection rate goes down. I think this way.
Well, I didn't think it could work super well here, because we had like all kinds of holiday plans and stuff like that.
We backed out of it. Yeah. Everyone was there.
We saw some people over, my mom and my dad was out after, but it was just big. Actually, kind of nice to not be able to go anywhere.
I made like a gourmet feast and I ended up just sitting there looking at it. And I called friends that live across the street. I haven't seen them in a long time. They weren't traveling. They called me and what's up? I said, I got a big man who wants cheese here in the college. You want meat on your porch? They were like, yeah. You're bringing lobster.
Hold on, someone's knocking at the door.
All right, it's not there. Yes. That's okay.
It was unconventional.
Did a conference.
One thing that I really enjoyed around doing homes, is that. Like,
Did you start school this year?
yeah, he went to pre-K last year, so he got like full way. That he, carbon copy. Yeah, that's not.
That's not your thing.
So. Very cool. I can. Good. I'm not. I'm in the music. He's, and I'm not old when I was searching his age. But just seeing him be good. Just to set that I have no idea about art.
I love watching kids like emulate their parents, like an engineer,
Yeah.
and he's super handy. He's a carpenter. His dad's a carpenter's academy. So when he was little, it was on my knee up there and follow the other crowd, figure out how a drill works. But his mother's a sculptor, so when he gets to the studio with her, he gets to explore that kind of thing. That's so cool. It's all little studio. She's like, actually, I've been calling for him. You know, non-toxic stuff.
Yeah.
And when I'm at work, I let him do his thing. And he sends me stuff all the time. And this kid's like, what a baby shit. So nice.
It's nice when they have some that can help guide them through the process. Because it was just me, I have no idea what to get them. How do I? But.
Anything you
Trying
can
to help them with it.
anything you can do, giant. It's just about the.
Is it because you're not?
I mean, really, every time I babysit, I have to rinse it.
I mean, you would imagine that this is on the thing, it's certain ratios.
No, like little trucks that come,
No, the trucks and stuff. We had a,
they're everywhere.
we had a big dirt house.
Fill out in.
It's like the most popular place in the entire house.
Did it?
So.
Yeah.
just about-
They're putting they're regrading their landscape to put steps in.
Yep.
And every time his neighbor has a backhoe, a little bobcat comes up the street, it's like going off the wall.
Yeah.
I just think it's so good. We took him to the, well, my place is on Main Street, so we had him with us for his first parade this year.
Mhm.
And I said to his mom,
It's almost like that, the
I
setup.
turned the fire on.
Well, because
so
it's
we
not
could
your
do
work in
it.
there.
So no, sit out here.
You know, more than into my
And my
computer. The entire thing, like my entire
They
computer.
couldn't handle the fire truck. Like
Mhm.
it scared them.
So when I
Yeah,
removed
like,
it,
oh, you'll be so
I know,
happy.
it
So we
was
got him on
like-
that insurance. As soon as the fire truck's coming up, he just.
I don't know what's in my little place, but look, they put it in my hand. It's just like,
Okay, we're gonna come some.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And he was
That's why I
like,
can't
he
get
was
in.
fine. I said, you wanna go outside? I said, no.
So just call them. That's pretty good.
Right, that's their. Yeah.
Don't you? That's fine. It's just.
Yeah.
Put a can of vodka, cover it down.
We lived in Rochester before, so we go past the fire station, they would have the door open. The trucks. You know, we give them the hats and I put them up in the seats and stuff like that. So
It's just so much fun. It's the best part of the parade. The first year I was there, I was sitting on my porch the weekend of the parade and I didn't realize it was the parade. And I scared. I just heard the march go down.
Yeah.
That's something that's second year.
It's the name that you want.
And then you know, they started coming down my street and we were throwing candy.
That's what I'm saying.
This is an
I
interesting
love
tradition. I do this. Never front row seat. And the whole, I really love that.
Yeah, we didn't get down there because we try to get out early so that we can get out before kids start because
It's
in our neighborhood, there's no street light. So it's like,
a little too. Yeah.
and so we have to start I think the parade is at 5:30 and that's usually when we're going out to the room.
I had my business on Main Street for 5 years. and it was- We always underestimated how much money we made. It was just worth it. You know, one year I was like, oh, my.
This guy showed up.
We're
Username and password.
We'll be fine for that break.
Yeah, I don't log in.
But you know, you want a business. So it was how I met it.
Mhm.
Every single parent was like, wow, this is the best time to take that. Hand out candy. It's great.
We haven't been that yet. When we get a little bit older, we might do the parade and then trip it down there, but it's a good decision.
That's awesome. Like, I had friends that lived on Young Street
Mhm.
and my farmhouse.
Is that
way
my
down
friend?
on 236, so we never see it.
Yeah.
We would.
Yeah.
come out, we would
No,
bring
those
past the
people
staff,
are
and like,
like
good, like the turns at the door. Never
You know what I mean?
Because everybody just.
Been like years.
Well, yeah, but they're little, so you don't take them to.
Connect
the
everything.
radius and everybody's.
Oh, really?
Like, they come in and say, yeah.
Oh, you need to go.
Yeah.
No, you should bring kids.
When you remember this one,
Well, friends over there.
that's about how they would block off the street, so cars can go to by this and we would expect them to get obliterated so the first year. Which was.
We bought things.
Yeah. Then we had, we were priority.
It's been way.
And then last year was a little bit, this last year was a little bit better.
It's been way off. It was, pre-COVID, it was crazy. Everyone. It's one of the only secure, you feel secure for the thing, whatever.
Yep.
And everybody's. I feel like it's so-
Hello. How are you? Here.
Welcome aboard.
Greg will be here in just a minute.
Yeah, chair, that's good.
I like it. It's gonna be you. We took a vote.
Huh?
We took a vote. It was gonna be you. If he didn't show up.
I'm not the most senior in this group.
I think we'll start the meeting and you guys can decide who's gonna. So someone ended up being a police officers.
The one I just sent you. Hang on, wait a minute.
No.
Oh, that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good.
They.
I tried to send you one. No, yeah, yeah. Maybe a minute.
So don't worry about it.
I haven't seen any.
They sent out.
The
Good.
draft stuff for the community.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I figured I'd send it, but I just don't know what-
A little more of their traffic.
you were proud of the credit card. Something kind of new. They wouldn't really, they were gonna go.
It's pretty,
And then they tried to. Try to move on.
Pretty packed.
No. We're here.
Oh, yeah.
There really wasn't a lot of.
I think so.
They're gonna, I think. the
Yeah,
town
they're
council,
not-
they need to have a conversation about it. Rest of it. And the solar farms, I want to change that.
hello.
Not the setback, but the distance between, which was never. needed. So that.
I don't know why I have a call
For
with them.
parcels.
Oh, I love that.
Clear multiple solar farms. So it's something apart. So that nobody can sort of take it under their process. Which I don't know who would want to do that, but.
Greg is here, so we'll be starting in, moving in just a second, okay?
Good.
Okay. That's the beginning. Sorry.
Good. Hi, Chris. Good. Hey, Ning. We're about to wait, just running a little bit behind. All right, everybody ready? Yes. All right, is this being on and recorded?
You're right, that.
Okay, why don't we stand and pledge allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, January 18th Planning Board meeting. To begin with the meeting, I will ask if there's any public comment. I'll preface that in the sense of I'll ask here in the audience, and then if there's anybody on Zoom that would like to make public comment. And for those listening, public comment, if there's anything you'd like to say or a comment that's not on the agenda, that's fine. I will also allow some general comment from the public for those that wish when we go to old business on any other application item. So is there any comment from the public on any item that's not on the agenda? I'll start here. Seeing none, is there anything on Zoom? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much. And so first item up on the agenda would be the approval of the January 4th, 2022 minutes. I got a chance to review them. I don't see any issues with them. Is there a motion by the board or for any edits or any issues that you see? So moved. They've been moved and been seconded. Any further conversation? Chris, I believe you were here at the last meeting, so you can
Also,
vote on those. And is there no further conversation? We'll take a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. We do have one item under new business. That item is tabled from a previous meeting. My suggestion for purposes of moving this along is that that remain tabled unless any other board member has a burning desire to lift it from the table and discuss it. Seeing none, we'll move on. We're going to get right into old business. The first item up under old business is MSP 22003. There is no new business on this. However, we do expect at one of the next meetings, probably in February at this point, to hear from the folks at Sandville Estates, the developer over there, and they'll be advancing any particular, the preliminary application.
Yeah.
So we look forward to the review of that potential application.
Great. There's one item
Yeah.
I did note in that Mr. Attinger confirmed that the application that they sent in still had 37 units. And he noted that, would we see paperwork adjusted?
You're
should
gonna
be-
see adjusted
yeah.
paperwork for that.
It should be
Yep,
35.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That's
Okay.
just what to expect. Thank you.
no worries.
All right, so before we get to the next item, MSP 22007, I just kind of want to outline from my view how I'll be handling the meeting on that tonight. So for the board members that may recall, this is the application that we sent for third-party review several months ago. And so tonight, I believe we'll be hearing from Mr. Feldman.
He's on. Yep.
Okay, and so. Got it, okay. And so the preferred course of action tonight is to hear that report. Everybody here does have a copy of it in your binder. And so I'm going to ask that Mr. Feldman review with us for public consumption the third-party result or the result of the third-party review. And at that point, provided we'll give an opportunity for the board to answer any questions they may have. After that, I will allow you folks to speak your piece and help us understand anything that you want from us. The board can then answer any that they have of the applicants and follow up or rebuttal with the gentleman from SMPDC. And at that point, if we're satisfied that all of our questions have been answered, we can then discuss the next steps. And before we move on with that, we'll ask if there's anybody in
Mr.
the
Chairman, may I
public.
make a motion?
So before we do move on, is there anybody, before we move on formally, do we have any other business pertaining to this application?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that I be recused from this discussion and vote on the site plan.
Fair enough. So this
I
is,
have to, just wanted to add that I am an adjacent butter
oh,
to
fair.
the property in question.
Thank you.
That's the only reason why I'm recusing.
Thank you, Christine. So a little bit of a unique circumstance here because Christine is technically an alternate. However, according to our bylaws, Christine is allowed to partake in the conversations. But given her looking to recuse herself, the board would need to make a finding and formally recuse her. So do I have a motion to recuse Chris Prunier from this particular discussion regarding MSP? Is it 22007?
Yes.
Yeah, 22007. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved, second, and no further discussion, all in favor? Okay, the motion passes. Christine, thank you, and you to go sit out front. Thank you. Okay. So going back here in your binders, there is a tab labeled third-party review. And again, at this point, I'd like to welcome Lee J. Feldman from SMPDC to review the findings of his third-party review with us. Mr. Feldman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members and the public that is both there and on Zoom. Again, my name is Lee J. Feldman. I'm the Director of Planning for Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And I was asked to come in as a third-party independent reviewer on this application and not one representing the community in their typical planning services. So with that, I will run through the application, my memo. The applicants, Roxanne Poulin and Sam Flinkerstrom, are seeking approval to utilize the former Rio's Barber Shop for a beer and wine garden, which is proposed to operate as a restaurant. The application cover letter indicates there will be an 8-seat bar and an ADA compliant bathroom. The application cover letter goes on to discuss outdoor seating, but does not put a number on the number of seats available. The number of seats is important for 2 reasons. First, as it relates to the planning board review, parking on site is required per 140-24C of the zoning ordinance, which states, within all districts, with the exception of the industrial district, parking is required to be located to the side or rear of the building. Parking may be placed in front of the building, and such placement will create a better traffic flow, will not detract from the neighborhood environment, or due to topography and other site considerations, parking cannot be reasonably placed to the side or rear of the building. In no case shall the parking and drives cover more than 30% of the front yard. The applicant in the application is seeking a variance for the parking spaces. In seeking a variance, and I take that word literally because there are waivers and there are variances. I won't go through the criteria for a variance, but that is to be granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, I would suggest that the applicants should submit the variance request prior to seeking planning board approval, simply because if the variance is not granted, then the application cannot proceed. If the planning board were to approve the use, it would be doing so without the variance being in place to satisfy the deficient parking situation. 1 parking space per 3 seats is required for a restaurant to be located on site. The other issue, as noted above in regards to the number of proposed seats, is that the applicant has stated that they plan on 1 ADA bathroom. However, under the state plumbing code, the number of urinals and water closets is based on the number of seats proposed for the facility. And we don't normally get into that with the planning board, but I think it's important they're aware of that situation. A structure this size may not be able to handle the number of facilities required. Porta potties are not recognized under the state plumbing code as a permanent solution as bathroom facilities. I'm going to go into what I saw as violations at the time. It's been several months, and I know there's been a separate packet that the applicant has submitted in regards to that. It is my understanding that the work in the shoreland zone and floodplain has been completed without proper permits. The applicant has constructed a retaining wall within both locations. The action has 2 implications associated with it. 1, the shoreland zone is established by the state and is intended to protect the resource as well as any habitat that may exist in those areas as designated. South Berwick had identified this area as a shoreland zone based on the definition of streams in the state law. Work such as the construction of retaining walls is not allowed in the shoreland zone without proper permits from the town and state DEP. Number 2, work in the flood zone is also not allowed without FEMA permitting that work due to the impacts associated with redirection of water during periods of flood, which can have impacts downstream without hydrogeologic analysis, and a letter of map amendment being granted by FEMA. Under waivers, the applicant asked for a number of waivers, and I will go through those for you. The applicants are seeking numerous waivers associated with the application. Number 1, South Berwick Code 140-77D1G, the location of all erosion and sedimentation control measures. They're stating that it's not applicable, not regrading of the site. I state this item should not be waived. As noted above, work has been done in the resource and all erosion control measures should have been installed prior to that work being done. Number 2, South Berwick Code 140-77D, I and K, the location of all buffers and setbacks in the shoreland, slope protection and resource protection districts, or as required by subdivision ordinance. They've indicated that that's not applicable. The entire site is located within the shoreland slope district, and they refer to 140-12B1P. I state the board should not be granting a waiver since the applicant states the entire site is in the shoreland zone. all of this site should have been protected, or in the least, all proper state and local permits obtained prior to any work being done. Number 3, South Berwick Code 14077D 2B, a stormwater management plan prepared by an engineer licensed in the state of Maine. Any site plan triggering Maine DEP Chapter 500 stormwater management rules shall conform to those regulations. The applicant shall obtain all necessary Maine DEP permits before the planning board grants site plan review approval, unless the planning board grants such approval with conditions. They've indicated it's not applicable because the site is less than 1 acre. And I state a waiver could be granted if the planning board allows this project to move ahead. Number 4, South Berwick Code 14077D 2C, an erosion and sedimentation control plan. They've indicated it's not applicable and refer to waiver number 1. I state, see waiver 1 above as recommended by this report. Soil and erosion control measures should have been put in place by the applicant due to the sensitive nature of Driscoll Brook while work is being done adjacent to it. Number 5, South Berwick Code 14077D2D, existing and proposed topography at a minimum of 5-foot contours. The board may require 2-foot contours if conditions warrant such mapping. The location of any 100-year floodplain shall also be shown, and base flood elevations given indicate areas within the proposed site and within 50 feet of the proposed site where ground removal or filling is required, and give its approximate volume in cubic yards. A soils map based on the York County Soil Survey shall also be provided. The board may require a high-intensity soil map prepared by a soil scientist licensed in the state of Maine if conditions warrant. The applicant has indicated it's not applicable. Landscaping was remediated after demolition of previously existing mobile home. No further grading will be performed. I state the waiver should not be granted. As discussed earlier in this memo, this property is in the floodplain and work has been done without proper FEMA permitting or Maine DEP permitting. Further, the applicant states that they will be providing floral features, which is new proposed landscaping where a landscaping plan has not been submitted. The high-intensity soil information is probably not applicable to this matter, however. The other portions of this, as noted, is very relevant to the application. Item number 6, South Berwick Code 14077D2E, a landscaping plan prepared by a registered landscape architect showing all existing natural land features, trees, forest cover, and water sources, and all proposed changes to the features, including size and type of plant material. Water sources will include ponds, streams, lakes, brooks, wetlands, and drainage retention areas. The applicant has suggested it's not applicable. Existing natural land features will remain untouched. We will only intend to install floral features. And I state, as noted in 6 above, the applicant is providing floral features and there is a water resource, Driscoll Brook, abutting this property. A registered landscape architect should be involved in the design of any floral arrangements due to the sensitive nature of Driscoll Brook and the shoreland resource within the property. Number 7, South Berwick Code 14077D2G, traffic flow pattern within the site entrance and exits, loading and unloading area, curb cuts on the site and within 100 feet of the site. The planning board may require a detailed traffic study prepared by a professional engineer to include, but not be limited to, 1, the project number of motor vehicle trips to enter or leave the site estimated for daily and peak hour traffic volumes. 2, the project traffic flow pattern, including vehicle movements at all major intersections likely to be affected by the proposed use of the site. 3, the impact of the traffic upon exiting abutting public and private ways in relation to existing road capacities, existing and proposed daily and peak hour traffic levels, as well as road capacity levels shall be given. 4, any impacts on pedestrian movements in areas adjacent to the site. The applicant has stated that this is a restaurant located on Main Street. No new road or sidewalks are being proposed on the site. And I state, This item is certainly debatable, however, if the applicant is proposing a significant amount of seating outside above the 8 seats proposed in the opening letter, then I would suggest trip generation and a pedestrian count should be provided in order to better understand the level of activity and the impacts to the area. Number 8, application checkbox, location of all present and proposed septic tanks and leach fields. They have indicated that it's not applicable, no septic tanks or leach fields are on the site. And I state that this item is not applicable and can be waived. My recommendation at the time was, at this time, I cannot recommend approval of this application. There are outstanding violations on the property which need to be corrected prior to this application being considered in front of the planning board. And additional information needs to be included based on my considerations of the waivers being requested. Additionally, as noted in the proposal portion of this memo, the variance request should be dealt with prior to the planning board taking action on the location. And I have also, I did not provide a memo or anything to it, but I did some additional research on the ordinance in regards to the parking. I can either get into that now or answer that if you have any additional questions of me at the time.
Mr. Feldman, I'd say continue with, if you have something to share with us on that.
Certainly. I've got a couple of things here, so bear with me. Under Chapter 140 zoning, Article 5, performance standards applicable to all uses, Section 140-24, off-street parking and loading. If you look at or have a chance to review letter L in that standard, it says where a new use or expanded use is in an existing building cannot meet the above parking standards, the planning board may, following a minor site plan review in accordance with this chapter, waive the above requirements. One of the things that was not clear to me was if this was being reviewed as a minor site plan or a major site plan. If it's a minor site plan, then the waivers can be granted by you if you choose to do so as it relates to the parking spaces. If it is a major, I don't see a major site plan. I don't see any standards in here that allow this board to give relief to that parking standard.
So timeout right there. This is a major site, correct?
That's what it is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so again, I don't see anything in that section of the ordinance that allows for any relief for a major site plan for parking spaces. Also, under site plan review, and I think it was more of a procedural matter, and again, I was not brought in at the time, but as I'm understanding where this process is, under 140-77 site plan review, administration, which is letter C, number 2 states the South Berwick Code Enforcement Officer shall determine whether the site plan review is required. At that time, based on the land use table, table A, he or she shall also classify the use requiring either major or minor site plan review, determining that no site plan review is required. The decision of the code officer under this subsection may be appealed to the Board of Appeals within 30 days. I just raised that because I wasn't sure of major or minor. Number 3 in that section, any person requiring major site plan review under this section as determined by the South Berwick Code Enforcement Officer shall submit a sketch plan application to the South Berwick Planning Board during the regular town hall business hours. A sketch plan application shall consist of an application prescribed by the town together with a conceptual site plan. I'm not sure because of the timing that I was brought into this, but has this project gone through sketch plan review yet?
That's, I would say, the process that we're in. We've never approved actually a sketch plan at this point. It's still under review.
Okay. And number 5, under that same section, then it states, following the sketch plan discussion, or if the application is for a minor site plan as determined by the code officer, the applicant shall submit a formal application together with the fees listed in 140-77D. And then it goes on to state the planning board may choose to consult an independent engineer, planning consultant, or other professional concerning the application, the applicant at their expense, which is where I'm sitting right now. I believe that was all the additional information I had, except that I did receive an additional packet from the applicant, or the applicant's attorney, Greg Braun, a while back. I honestly, there were a lot of pictures in there and whatnot. I couldn't see anything that would really change the status of my memo regarding where this application is at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for that detailed explanation. Do any board members have any questions? Comments?
The only question I had, regarding this information was in terms of the erosion sediment control measures. If the work has already been done, and this is just probably my ignorance on the process, but is that something that you can do retroactively, like, or is that something that is while work is being done, you would do that?
So usually erosion control measures are put in place before any work is done. The intent of that is to hold back soil or silt from getting into, in this case, Driscoll Brook. If there's any grading or anything being done in that area, the photos that I've seen would suggest that they had done some work on the grading area that going down into Driscoll Brook, and they had put in some fairly large crushed stone to stabilize that area. I still believe that silt fencing or hay bales being staked at the base of that area should be put in place for at least a year to make sure that that area is stabilized before the silt fencing is removed, so that if there is any heavy storm periods, especially coming this spring, that area won't just erode down into the brook.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not just a during construction type thing, it's, continue afterwards, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you see other developments elsewhere that have erosion control measures or silt fencing put in place, a lot of times that will stay there for 2-3 years, simply to make sure that that area stabilizes before they're able to take it out and make sure that nothing terrible will happen to any of the resources.
A question, the proposal has 8 seats. I think mentioned, but there are also picnic tables, which would be a number more. How do picnic tables factor into seats? You have any comments on that in that respect? I mean, it would imply that we'd have more than 8 people attending your business. Hopefully that probably need a little more than that to keep a business going.
Right. Yeah, I had seen, again, the pictures that were recently submitted showed a number of picnic tables out there. Picnic tables, in my estimation, is seating, whether it's seasonal or it's year round, it's seating, and it is a driver that's going to, suggest that they're going to be able to serve many people, depending on how many can sit at those picnic tables. And so therefore parking based on those tables should be required. I know during COVID, we dealt with a lot of various restaurants and businesses in many communities, and basically the way other municipalities dealt with that very issue was that in order to allow people to eat outdoors, they were eliminating seating indoors. And so we were subtracting the seats from inside to allow to accommodate the outdoor seating because of the parking standards. So, I don't see this as while they're seasonal or they're not a detractor. If they're available, they're an attractor to the business.
this is a general question or maybe comment and I don't know, Lee J, if you could answer this or Jenny. Would they have to obtain as part of this, like I don't know what the correct terminology is, like a special amusement permit or anything from the town for outdoor seating? Are there any other requirements for that? I know I read something in the ordinance. But
I would defer to Jenny on that. I can't answer that for you.
Need
Yeah,
an
Lee
answer.
J,
I don't
okay.
need an answer tonight. I'm just kind
So
of
the-
curious.
No, so the answer is yes. So if they do any kind of live entertainment, serving outside, they would need a liquor license and obviously a special amusement license as well.
Alright. So, yeah. Let me just write that down.
That be separate though from us. I mean, I don't recall anywhere in the application that they would do live entertainment. for us.
I think she's just given us, I didn't,
Yeah.
I don't think I didn't read
Would
that.
there be able
Yeah.
to- Is that something that needs to be determined now or in terms of the
You
application?
can
Or that could be
absolutely
later?
go through the planning process.
Okay.
Comes after.
But you're saying that it's. We're seating.
Special amusement would be needed
Would be,
for
okay.
entertainment.
Something to look at, yeah.
Is that what your question is, Greg?
When outside seating comes up, that's just kind of one of the things that comes about. I'd have to go back and look to see if it's something that's actually needed. I don't know if
Gotcha.
there's another level of permitting that they would have to obtain from at least typically in those situations would be like a council would authorize
Okay.
typically a special use. I don't know. It was just a general question. I don't expect a full answer tonight, but it's something we should probably just look into or explore more. Do you intend to do, outside live entertainment? There's, you could just, a simple yes or no, as you make your presentation would suffice. And so, okay. Any other questions?
So most of the stuff that we've had so far has been, developments and stuff like that, but with this being a different type of review, are those permits and things like that, things we would expect at this point, or is that, we approve the preliminary and then they, put all those things together and then back?
So they'll apply for their liquor license.
Yeah.
After they go through the planning board process.
Okay,
And that will go to the town council.
okay,
Yep. It's not something that you guys have to,
we don't have to worry about it.
Nope.
Okay,
I guess just a comment based on, expecting more than I think we heard 40 when we were talking with potential customers. In my mind, that seems, a trip generation, pedestrian. Do we need to make sure there's a walkway signage so that enough flow will be able to pass from wherever parking? I think you mentioned a couple parking areas proximate, even if they aren't parking in front. Seems like a good idea in order to make sure if we, and to support the effort. We make sure it's a safe for the environment for their customers.
perhaps I'll address that or
Yeah.
touch on it.
Something to keep in mind. I think
You
that's my
have-
only other comment at the moment.
Did you have something? No? So, no more questions in our end, and so.
Can I introduce Greg Brown here real quick?
Sure.
He's our attorney representing us. He's been super helpful with us.
Trying to be, yeah,
And,
and I normally,
Could you say the name again? please?
yeah, Greg, Greg, last name Braun, Braun, attorney with Bergen Parkinson out of Kennybunk. And I am here on behalf of Caponera LLC and the two principals, Roxanne and Sam, who are here. Happy to ask a couple questions of Lee J. Before I do, I just real quick here, I just want to make sure we get all our ducks in a row. I'm here honestly to facilitate this process moving forward. I haven't participated in any previous meetings. I don't know what's been said or what hasn't. I've had a chance to review just about all the documentation that my clients have provided to me and which I think have been provided to the town and to this board, as well as the Lee J. But that's not to say that the application is complete yet, right? Or that there aren't some questions that still need to be answered. So that's how I view the process and where we're currently at. is we're trying to establish and determine what outstanding issues, if any, there are, and what we need to do or how we should go about addressing and answering those, right? So we won't call it a workshop, but that's the idea here, right? Is to make some determination as it relates to the completeness of this application. You mentioned that you think, I'm just curious if you could do me the courtesy of maybe identifying where in the ordinance it suggests that outside seating might require some additional permit or approval. I understand special events,
Yeah.
but that's something different, right?
It's, his question was special amusement.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just so we're clear,
Yeah.
sitting outside at picnic tables, that on its own doesn't create an issue. That on its own isn't
Right.
something, okay.
Yep.
So only if and when we might want some live music to play or some other event there. And I think in fact, that might be like a 2-day before sort of permit request that you make through the town. Is that right?
That's to the town council. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
okay.
That's a question for them.
All right, so but so long as we can understand that the picnic tables on the property, that on its own isn't some special consideration or something that we need to deal with. And I don't, there are a lot of things that I won't say I take issue with, but I do think we need to kind of vet and explore. But the most important one, first and foremost, because it would just shut us down otherwise, is going to be this question of whether or not the planning board has the authority to waive, right, or amend the parking requirement. Because as Lee J has indicated in his third-party memo, he suggests that the zoning board of appeals may actually be the appropriate party to bring that request to. And if that's the case, then effectively, we can't do any business here until the zoning board of appeals might make that decision, right? So I think that would be the first thing that I just ask, and that way we can, kind of decide whether or not it's explicitly a requirement, or if we feel comfortable as a governing body here moving forward, with this to be part of our request and our application. And Lee J, I'm glad you pointed out, and it's what I viewed and seen as well. And that's that chapter 140 subsection, or chapter 140, section 24, subsection L. And it does seem to explicitly grant the planning board approval to waive the parking requirement for a change of use to an existing building. And we're not, expanding the building. It's just a simple change of use for that location. There is specific verbiage in the code that talks about a minor site plan needing to take place for that waiver to be effectuated. But I don't read the ordinance to say that it's limited to minor projects, but rather it would include major as well. My understanding generally is that anything that would be included in a minor is automatically included sort of in a major. The way I read this ordinance to mean or to have the effect was to say that if this is one of the only things essentially that an applicant was coming before the board for, a minor site plan review would be required before you could waive that parking requirement. And so I don't know if maybe Attorney Saucier wants to weigh in if he's had a chance to review this, or he might have an opinion on it. But I think, it would be important first to determine whether or not the board has the authority to waive that requirement, or if we really do need to table this, for say 90 days or something and go somewhere else and then come back.
So I'm willing to, let the attorney weigh in if he'd like. We're in trouble seeing.
He's in the top. Yeah.
Oh,
he's
okay.
top left.
I would
Hi,
that, interpretation, I'm not so sure I share your interpretation, however. To me, it would appear to be pretty clear cut. So if our attorney has any different opinion, then I'm willing to listen.
yeah, hi, this is Phil Saucier from Bernstein Shore, and I represent the town. I was asked to be here tonight. Can you hear me, Mr. Chair? So you're, okay. Represent the town and was asked to be here to help the planning board if you have any questions. I will say that I did not have a copy of Mr. Feldman's report. I was listening intently and taking notes. I now do have it. It was emailed to me during this meeting, but I didn't have it. So one thing I would say is I would be happy to weigh in this. I don't want to analyze it on the fly. I know that Greg Braun would agree with me on that, putting you in the spot. I did take a look very quickly, and I'm familiar with the ordinance, obviously, and I saw the provision you just dealt with. I also think there's another provision that's worth at least thinking about. And I haven't been involved in the review, but under the site plan review provisions in 140-77, it does give the planning board the authority to waive parking requirements. What I don't know, because I haven't looked at the application or fully, what we're asking for here is if that comes into play or if it just is not relevant here because we're in a different provision. But under the general site plan review standards, you do have certain waiver authority, obviously, for certain standards. That's in 144-77E. One of the, in there it says the planning board may waive the criteria in this section upon a determination of the planning board, the application criteria is not necessary to carry out the intent of the section. And if you look down, one of them is parking, referring back to 140-24, which is what we were just talking about. So there seems to be some, to the extent this is applicable, and again, I want to sort of put a pin in that because I want to go back and look at it after the meeting. But that's one thing I think we should just think about on whether this applies or not. And maybe it doesn't, because there is some more specific language, as Mr. Braun and Mr. Feldman have both pointed out, back up in 140-24. So I highlight that as something I think we need to look at a little bit more. I think it's a good question, and I'd be happy to weigh in on it after the meeting.
I can accept that.
So does that take the form of an opinion letter?
Yeah, it's up to the chair, but typically when I'm asked for planning board, I'll write a memo or a letter to the board with just my interpretation of the provision. Whatever's the most helpful to you, but that's typically how we would do it, or I'd send it to the staff technically, who would then pass it along to the board. If you're not gonna make decisions tonight anyway, I mean, it sounds like Greg is trying to ask if you should table it and wait for 90 days, but if you're not going to make a determination tonight anyway, I assume you would be coming back to the board anyway at a future meeting, and so we could bring this one up, at the next meeting. That's just a suggestion. Whatever you want to do timing wise.
Appear that perhaps we may have some slightly conflicting information, perhaps a little bit of a gray area that I want to explore more. So, that being said, because it is tied to parking, and the initial recommendation is to table it and go get your variance and then come back. That seemed to be like a good path forward. But if there's this, what it now amounts to, this interpretation question, I think that's the first question that needs to be answered. And then that would help guide the future conversation as it pertains to the parking.
Yeah, well, as it pertains to the parking, exactly, and that's one.
Right, that's
issue.
right. Yeah.
The rest is, I think the other thing, well, one of three that we'd like to talk about, or, maybe see tonight, would be, to what extent some of these requirements should be weighed. Lee J's, weighed in through his memorandum on several of them. We can kind of discuss, what the actual or practical effect of the application and the proposal is, and whether this planning board thinks that waivers should be granted or not. And if you would indicate to us a unwillingness to waive certain requirements, then that can provide us opportunity to more fully complete the application, provide more information that when we do come back here for the next time, and certainly as it relates to the parking, we can have that additional information provided to you. I guess I'd ask Lee J, you suggested that, I sent over that you received some pictures as far as, an additional update or submission from us today. Last week, in conformity with the necessary timeframes, we submitted what was titled addendum dated January 18th, 2023. And I believe that was about a 13 or a 14-page document at least. It did include with it a number of pictures of the site pre and post construction, but it also included with it an email that was obtained from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection concerning a permit by rule application that was submitted by the applicant on November 11th. And I'm curious if that was part of your packet, if you had a chance to review that.
I have reviewed that. On the surface of it, certainly, the application was prepared and sent to the DEP. I'm not necessarily convinced that I have not heard from the DEP But I'm not necessarily convinced, because you are in a resource that you might need something more than just a permit by rule. But that was not for me to research, because I'm this third-party independent reviewer that's only looking at the information that's put in front of me. And I'm not digging in as I would if I were working on behalf of the town. So what I have in front of me is the paperwork, and I'm assuming if it's past the 30 days, then, you know, it's good to go. I do want to, I don't want to muddy the waters too much, and I apologize, but I just want to go back to the parking issue for a second. And certainly if Phil wants to talk with me about it at some point, but if you do, I do see in that criteria section E where it talks about the waivers, but the thing that threw me off even the first time, why I suggested that I don't know, and this is certainly an issue for Phil to wrap his head around, is that under number 5 in the criteria, it says parking shall conform to the parking standards outlined in 140-24 or 140-25. So I don't know how that shall conform comes into play with this or not, but I'd throw that back in there for Phil to consider when he looks at the issue.
You know, along with that parking, you know, in terms of whether it's determined, and at least from my perspective, the board can weigh in. I think it's going to be a critical part of the conversation that we're going to have to understand what the proposed seating is going to be in numbers. You know, the ordinance gives us, I believe it gives us a very clear, you know, formula for determining the number of spaces that would be required. And depending on what we hear from these individuals, again, we know the building has 8 seats, but it is somewhat of an undefined, you know, amount of people out there. Is there going to be a limitation on the number of people out there? Or is there going to be, well, when we fill up the seats, we're going to turn people away? So I'd like to have a better understanding of what, again, if it's determined that waivers could be initiated by the board, which seems that there's some potential conflicts there.
Sure.
But I think that's, depending on whatever direction that goes in, it's going to be critical either way, frankly, to know the overall estimated people, seats, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Circulation.
And frankly, I mean, it's a little frustrating that there's confusion on that. I would, you know, that people take a look at the application that was submitted on August 16th, 2022. I know Lee J's referenced the cover letter. You know, people have come back to that repeatedly, but quite frankly, it's a 42-page application. It's pretty thorough. I mean, for most individuals who I've dealt with previously who've done this pro se, this is, you know, relatively comprehensive. And on page 19 of that application, which is entitled Attachment D, the applicants clearly state that, you know, they you know, consider or are intending approximately 60 seats is the intention, right? And then beyond that, it says picnic tables plus 8 bar seats. So I think it's actually pretty clear what the intention was. Now I will say that, you know, based upon some of the input from Lee J and some further review of the ordinance and state law, you know, we understand that there actually should be an upper limit on what the capacity is based on the number of water closets or ADA accessible bathrooms on site. And this location and what you have as far as the second addendum that was submitted on January 18th indicates is that there's intended to be 2 bathrooms, and under the ordinance and the statute, that would allow for up to but no more than 50 individuals, I believe. And so what we're suggesting is that we would modify our application to have a capacity of 49 individuals, and that contemplates substantially outdoor seating. In fact, you know, and this is something to be considered as far as the parking issue as well. It's not a seasonal business per se. They do intend to be open year round, but indoor capacity is, you know, hardly anything, right? Again, 8 seats at the bar is what we're discussing. So what's intended and expected is that this would be sort of a seasonal location, a place where families, people from the community could come, have something to eat, something to drink right there on the property, sit outside with their kids. And the weather, as we all know here in Maine, only allows for that to happen during a relatively finite period of time, right? And so but given, you know, what we're asking for, you know, we have to consider that capacity year round. So that's what we're doing. So the intention here is to have 49 individuals as far as the maximum capacity. And our proposed toiletries, so to speak, speak to that and are in conformity with it. And the parking as it relates to that then would require, and I believe the code says explicitly, but for waiver, right, or variance, would be one parking space for each 3 occupants. And so we'd be looking at something, what's the math there, 18, give or take? parking
It's actually
spots?
16.
16
Yeah.
parking space. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's sort of where we're at. I would take the position that the code is open, and that, again, it speaks to minor site plan being a minimum that would be required for the planning board to approve a waiver of that requirement. It's our understanding, I stand to be corrected every day of my life. But it's my understanding that, routinely the town of South Berwick has waived this requirement, especially in this B1 zoning location. I don't know, but again, on information and belief, I think this waiver was granted for Pied Cow, Fogarty's and Relish, which are all businesses right there within that district. And so we would hope and expect that this sort of action would be in conformity with prior actions taken by the town. And so again, I hate to belabor the parking issue, but I think it sort of is a keystone thing. We can only kind of move forward so much until it is, actually dealt with, or an understanding has come to as far as what this organization can or can't do. Moving forward, though, because I think, again, the second thing we really would like to do tonight is have some idea of what waivers may or may not be approved by the town, so that we've got a better sense of what additional information or actions we need to take. Lee J had mentioned that he'd only reviewed what had been provided to him. He seems to be under the impression that there are violations on site. I'm a little confused about really where that understanding or belief comes from. I mean, obviously, there's nothing in the application itself that suggests there are violations on site. The applicant hasn't here said, here's an application, and oh, by the way, we've done all these things without approval, right? And so I'm not really sure where the understanding or the belief that ongoing violations or prior violations took place. I have not seen any notice of violation from the town as it relates to the shoreland area. I haven't seen any notification of environmental protection that indicates there is any violation on the property, either prior or ongoing. What I know is that the applicants on November 11th submitted a permit by rule application to the Department of Environmental Protection. The time period to appeal it or to object to it passed, and under those rules, failure to reply, so to speak, by the department constitutes an approval. We didn't want to rely on that, right? So, kind of, squeaky wheel gets the grease. We proactively sought some response from the DEP and included in your packet that was submitted on January 18th, 2023, that second addendum is that email from the DEP indicating that the permit by rule application was in fact approved. And so again, I haven't seen anything that indicates that a violation exists. To the contrary, in fact, what I know and what I see is that a permit by rule application was submitted and approved by the state. And so as it relates to, many of these sort of requests or suggestions, erosion and sediment control, setbacks or buffers, I think all of these things sort of speak to, whether or not a violation actually took place. And I'm not trying to hide the ball or make things difficult, but I'm really, kind of looking for some substantive information or documentation that might suggest this issue actually exists.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond to that because Greg is suggesting that I wasn't forthcoming or telling the truth, except that when you look at the site and the work that was done, and there was no permit by rule filed when that work was done, while I'm not the code enforcement officer and I don't cite them for violations myself, I know a violation when I see it. And there was a violation because that work had been done without proper permits.
And Lee J, were any additional documents or information provided to you related? And I'm not calling you a liar, Lee J. I hope you don't think that. That's not the point. But I'm looking for documentation or something of substance on paper that, we can actually point to and discuss.
I don't have any, no. But my eye tells me what I see. And while I cannot or did not cite them, I know that there was a violation there because work had been done without proper permits. That's a code issue for the town to have addressed.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I actually received a DEP email from Anna Smith, and she was actually supposed to reach out to the applicants. I'm not sure if she has or not. But I have an email from her that states otherwise.
So what date was that received?
January 17th.
Okay, so that was yesterday.
Sure, yeah.
Sure, yes, today's the 18th. So you received an email from the DEP stating otherwise?
Yeah.
Have you shared that with the board?
Sure. Hi, Jennifer.
No, I mean, like, you haven't circulated before today's date,
Nope,
and you haven't provided it to the applicant.
I didn't have to, but no, DEP was reaching out directly, and
I
that
see.
it says it in their email that they are reaching out directly to the
All right.
applicants. Would you like to hear the email or
Well,
no?
I'm just curious, like, you knew that this was on today's agenda, correct?
Yes, I
Yes.
did.
Don't you think that that sort of information would be relevant? And frustratingly, I mean, it's fine for you to say you're gonna read this email correspondence out
No, I
loud,
don't have to. We can wait.
but don't you think it would have made sense and been appropriate for, all of us to have had it
Well,
on?
let's say, Greg, let's not cross-examine the code officer at this point. I think it sounds like there's a piece of information that she has, and it should be shared. So let's get it to your clients and the board from the DP.
Hear it.
Send it to the.
Yep.
to
I'll
the
send it to our
It's
attorney.
Public
and Phil
information.
District. That's
Okay,
correct.
Yeah, attorney to attorney. Okay,
Okay, well, so I can't speak further to that because I haven't had opportunity to review it. Again, all I know is that application for a permit, after the fact permit was submitted on November 11th, and that was granted. That's all I know as of today.
And that's new information as of this meeting today,
Again,
a week ago.
I can't speak. Yeah.
Submitted a week ago.
Yeah, that information, that permit by rule was
Which is
submitted.
after the third-party review information is given. So I think there's context. Let's keep going.
Okay, sure, but I will say, as it relates to Lee J's request, that, erosion or sediment controls be put into effect for some period of time. I don't think we have any objection to that. I don't know necessarily to what extent or what, steps need to be taken, but if it relates to silt fence or placing hay bales along the bottom, to protect whatever that resource is, those are certainly things, that the applicant is willing to do. So we had made requests for a waiver of those considerations. I think we'd stand on that request, given the fact that, number one, the work's already been done, and number two, that we've submitted this application and it's been approved. But if the board is not willing to do that, we understand and we obviously defer.
Can I
Yes, sir.
speak to that specifically? And it's a question for the third-party review. In the response we received, it said both the DEP and FEMA. What I'd like to know is, has FEMA been addressed too with the actions that we've just gotten in the last week?
yeah.
So, and I think Mr. Braun can speak to this as well, because I think it was in the addendum packet that we got. There was communications with Sue Baker, who is the head of the Maine FEMA floodplain regulations. And I'm paraphrasing, and I'm probably taking out of context, but she suggests in there to the applicant that they also seek a letter of map amendment, which is stated in my memo, which was 3 months before. So I think there's some consistency with that aspect of it as well.
She does. She also states that I think it's kind of funny. Lee J may even be able to discuss this better than I, or maybe even Sam. There are preliminary flood maps that have been developed, but have not been adopted yet.
Right.
Those are intended and anticipated to be adopted in the fall of this year, if not earlier. And those new maps to be adopted would actually demonstrate that this property is no longer in the floodplain. And so some of these requirements, just through a passage of time, are going to go away. Absent that, we also think there's an argument related to the pre-existence of this building that, sort of that specific requirement wouldn't, be required here. Is that correct?
Related to the existing structure in that upper area.
Yeah.
And
So-
then floodplain management, the reason we asked her about picnic tables is because the land down that is in that area that is more likely in the floodplain that's new are not structures. So they also wouldn't be, like, they're not defined as structures.
So to answer some questions from my perspective right now, as we're learning more about this. Bill, you said something earlier regarding the erosion control about it's not just the immediate work, but it's also ongoing.
Hmm.
And so, at some point here, we're gonna have to go take a look at it. Pictures, I get that, pictures speak 1,000 words, it's clear work has been done, to what extent, I can't judge, but, I mean, some of the stuff you've done, it looks, pretty nice. But, it does look like you've added stuff in, so I think from an ongoing perspective, an erosion control plan, that's something that we would want to look at. So tonight, I would not be inclined to accept a waiver.
I think
on-
that's one where, we're okay.
Yeah, what you said
without a
there,
waiver
yeah,
at all.
and so,
Yeah.
I would want to see something there.
So, and in the addendum, as part of that PBR application, there is a sheet in there, CE 101, that has a erosion and sediment control plan shown on it. It's sort of
And just
mirror- it
for the
mirrors-
record, we just got this
Yeah.
today.
No, this
No.
packet was submitted last week, I think, on the,
Tuesday, I think?
yeah, on Tuesday of last
Mr.
week.
Chair, it was part of the documents that
Right.
the planning board received last Wednesday.
That's right, yep.
So
Just
it's
wanted to make sure that
closer to the
wasn't
back,
different.
closer to the back. So that shows silt fence on there, and we're more than happy to put a, some grade stakes and sock of straw and put that in there as appropriate. And
What
leave
page?
it however long until, it's necessary.
Let's see, I don't know that it's numbered.
Sorry, I didn't page these PDFs.
It's, it is in addendum, so this is addendum B of this most recent submission. And so it's gonna be from the cover page. I think 17 pages back. It's page 17. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this is the conditions prior to our demolishing the mobile home, the deck in the shed. And it's also related to another waiver, has existing topography on it, which is another one of the waivers we were requesting, but we tried to, in this PBR application, address the stuff that we did request waivers and spend more time. It basically did the work, so now we shouldn't need the waivers, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the argument is that, the PBR application and its contents have, frankly spoken to, both of those information waivers. Now, again, should Lee J suggest, or should the board, suggest, or the CEO suggest that some additional sediment control measures be taken now while the application is pending? Again, we're open to that. But as it relates to the information necessary to meet those parts of the application, we believe that, these diagrams, are sufficient for those purposes.
You can continue if you want.
Okay, yeah, please, thank you. speaking to, and so I think this shows up on page 3. I think it's page 3 of Lee J's third-party review, but it's numbered as 6. And this is the landscaping plan, where it's suggested that, there will be, and literally the word is install, floral features. And Lee suggests that, we should employ a registered landscape architect. I think just a little bit of misunderstanding there, or potentially, some more words, or different words could have been used. The intention isn't actually to plant anything or put anything in, so we wouldn't be disrupting the soil there. Instead, what we're talking about is potted plants, either large 5 to 10 gallon containers that would hold either
Go along. our
annuals
fencing,
or
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're not actually looking to disrupt the soil or to do anything in the way of plantings in the ground, but rather these are literally installations. So if you can consider or contemplate flower beds or flower boxes that aren't attached to the ground. That's the intention there. And so with that additional clarification, we would stand on our request that that section be waived. We're happy to amend the application to the extent necessary.
So back on the erosion sedimentation control, it's clear here that there used to be other structures out there. Those are taken down. You've said that. The mere fact of taking those down, and then it would appear an installation of a cement retaining wall, that in and of itself, those functions lead to, really higher levels of drainage in my review, or my view. You have more surface area, more sheeting that can occur. So, perhaps if we, I want to think about that some more, because I mean, if you're not going to plant anything, you're obviously putting ground cover down. Some type, mulches and stone, and there are requirements when you're in the shoreline zone about what types of materials are used, to meet the erosion and sedimentation control. So I think that would need to be further reviewed.
Okay, we made sure everything that we put down was not impervious, pervious. So that we actually, by removing the deck, the shed, and the mobile home, we increased the pervious area. Because those have roofs that obviously.
What about all this other stuff that would appear to be put in, the stone?
Yeah, those
The
are
mulch,
considered
because
pervious.
again, I know
So
that,
that they,
yeah, but I know within the shoreland zoning ordinance, which is really the penultimate issue here, of the controlling ordinance.
sure,
That has specific requirements related to the various types of mulches that you can use and the type of ground applications. If the hope is to put a bunch of stone down or put a bunch of, mulch, are you gonna let the weeds grow through it? What's the intent of maintaining that? But you're telling us that you're not going to be putting any plantings in at all, other than potted plants.
yeah, from the standpoint of along the embankment there, anything like from the top down, we made sure we haven't touched any of it, because we knew that was super sensitive, especially given the steep slope. The flatter wood chipped area, our plan was to leave it wood chips. I'm sure foot traffic itself is gonna help keep some of the vegetation down. I don't know from a professional standpoint, what is necessary right now to, alleviate your concern there. I don't see much of a concern myself, but again.
I think what we can do is we can provide additional information related to the materials that were used. I think we're confident that what was done was in conformity with any requirements that might be put upon the applicant. And as has been stated and is accurate, the amount of impervious surface on the property has actually been reduced. So the sort of concerns that you're voicing, I think are have actually been addressed, or it's really been an improvement to the property as it relates to those sort of things. But we can certainly provide some additional information and an outline of the detail or the plan and how it does conform with any requirements the shoreline zoning ordinance might put upon us. So and again, understanding that you would want that information before you might make a decision on whether a waiver would be appropriate or not. Okay,
Yep.
so we can do that. We can further
Yep.
provide information.
It's,
And again, the ordinance is clear. It says it's a registered landscape architect. It's right there. So, you know, if you're asking for a waiver from that, I think before we even consider that, I'd want to see and have further documentation as to what the intent is, what you're doing.
how do you mean?
Well, again, you know, I'm seeing, I don't know what the piece of land looked like. I've never been there. You know, so I'm really looking at the pictures here. And, you know, again, like I said, at some point, we're gonna want to go take a look at it. To better understand. But again, the erosion sedimentation control, you know, it's not just thrown in a hay bale or the, you know, the roll hay that they put out there to stabilize a bank. You know, oftentimes there are floral features that could be put in other native species plantings to help retain that embankment.
Yep.
And so I'm not suggesting that we would allow it or it doesn't have to be done. I think it would really be in the eyes of, you know, one, a landscape architect, or two, what is the requirement here of a permit? And now I'm hearing that there's some issue with this. And so
Yeah. We are.
so that's gonna be an issue that we're gonna have to overcome. There, where that ends up, I don't know. So I'm kind of keeping, you know, just a few issues as we, you know, progress through here. It sounds as if we have issues associated with parking, you know. We need to clarify that and get some further guidance on that. I think that is a key to moving forward. And whether or not, you know, we table it and review it and get, speak with our attorney on this. Communicate that to you and the board and figure out where to go from there.
Absolutely,
It seems to be kind of the appropriate path forward here on that one,
agreed.
you know, rather than continuing to waste everybody's time.
Sure. Well, I mean, in fact, the last waiver request had to do with the
Yeah.
traffic study. And you know, we think probably given the intended use and the location that a traffic study wouldn't be necessary and that's something that could be waived. But quite frankly, I don't even think you can come to that or consider that request until we establish whether or not this planning board can waive the parking requirement or if it has to go somewhere else first. So, you know, again, I think that is an issue or request that you know, would need to be tabled, barring you know, some input and an opinion from the attorney.
So I want to have a better understanding, in particular, as it pertains to the parking one. I agree, you stated it in your application, but now you're saying you would prefer to bring that down to 49 to meet some other requirements, as you explained earlier. Again, that seems okay. I'm not saying I approve it. What I'm saying is I'm following your logic in regard to that. But again, I think it's important to consider, you know, in our approval process, what is the intent out there? In terms of other things that you intend to do. I mean, you know, my understanding, at least in past experiences, we could put a limitation on that. You know, you're limited to 49 people in that regard. So, you know, how do you handle that when the people roll up that are walking downtown? Because I know one of your arguments in the past or in writing have been there's other parking around and, you know, people can walk down. So, you know, what does that do? And trip generation is more than just vehicles, it's also pedestrian. You know, and I want to get a better idea, frankly, on how it's laid out in relation to butters for the setback requirements, all that kind of stuff, and what we would technically allow or what we couldn't allow within those setbacks in the shoreline zone. Because there's just frankly certain activities you can't do, you know, within certain setbacks. And I know you raised an issue back at one of the prior meetings about, I think it was like 50 feet versus 25 feet. I don't quite remember, but there was, yeah, right, there was something there. So we want to look at that too. So we would need a better understanding of what the full intent of that, you know, building is. You know, because absent what the full understanding is, you know, I can very clearly see conditions being placed about number, you know, limiting activity and limiting, you know, the number of people based on the activities that you've expressed to us.
Yeah, so
we'd want to have some further conversation about
49
that.
would be the very max. I mean, by law with 2 restrooms, we can't go higher. And when it comes to calculating that capacity in the IVC, there's different ways to do it based on either square footage which in the event, in the situation of outdoor seating, obviously you can't do square footage. I mean, in a restaurant density, it would be way too much.
Yeah.
So you fix that by doing, providing
I gotta
fixed
look at
seating.
something. I'm listening, I just have to,
That's
I
right.
wanted to look at something.
You only count the number of seats that are provided. And that's how your capacity is determined.
Mhm.
Yeah, so for example. Along the lines of our intent, it's an 8-seat bar. But that bar is half of it's going to primarily serve as a place for people to walk up, order and receive food and drink. So 4 of those seats that are at the bar at any given time on a fair weather day probably won't even be there, you know what I mean? So it's, in that sense, there will be a little bit of fluctuation, but it's not to exceed 49, and that's, that's where we're at. And if there were to be an event where it would, that's, I think, where we would have to trigger that special use permit that we would go to the town or town council, whatever it may be, and change that way. But yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I was
So,
just looking at something else related to the ordinance. I'm like, oh, yeah, I wasn't ignoring that. Is there anything further you want to add?
yeah, just one additional, and I think, to the extent it hasn't been clearly said previously, I think it's, worth, the board hearing it, anew, and certainly any, members of the public, that are hearing in. Everybody gets, and understandably so, a little prickly and concerned when you hear things like shoreland zoning violations, right? Or, failure to obtain proper permits. I would just, and I know that, that rubs, the applicants the wrong way a little bit. Just recall that they made initial applications for this project, I think back in April, is that right? Or maybe,
November of 2021 for the demolition permit. For the
Yeah.
trailer.
and now granted, that was with someone new or someone, old in that position, right? And, following that granting of those permits, they were told that, what they'd been approved or the applications that they'd been submitted were either, incomplete, or that the authority shouldn't have invested in the CEO or some other reason, right? So the point I just want to make, here is that these are applicants who have attempted to go through the right channels, who have attempted to make and take the right steps through this process, right? And are now sort of in retrospect being told that they either didn't have the authority they thought they had, or that what authority they were granted was improperly given, right? And so just to be clear here, I don't want you to view the applicants as malfeasors or somebody that tried to skirt the law, right? But rather these are individuals who thought that they had obtained the appropriate permitting and approval and went forward with that understanding, and only later were told, that was not the case, right? And so here we are now trying to remedy that and cure that and work collaboratively with the town, towards, an appropriate and hopefully a positive outcome. I say that in part, again, just to kind of, speak it out loud again. I know it matters. But also to say that I believe currently still there is a stop work order on certain construction that was being conducted at the location. This small 450 square foot building on site. And that was done in lockstep with the prior permits being revoked. We would hope and ask that stop work order could be lifted as part of our proceeding here. It isn't related to the shoreline. It isn't related to anything that might put at risk natural resources there. But importantly, the condition of the building as it currently stands opens it up to possible injury should we have a large storm come through. This essentially is a job that was stopped, halfway through. The roof, and forgive me.
Right, can I just stop you? We have nothing to do. We can't tell the CEO what to do in the lift.
I understand that.
That's between you. The only thing that we can look at here is the application before us, whatever's happened in the past.
The stop work order
Demolition permit,
specifically
I can't-
references The planning board.
What's that?
The stop work order specifically references the planning board as being the party that needs to bless the project to continue.
Yeah, but they can't do that without approval, of the planning board, and just to let you know if you don't mind.
So are we talking about this particular project here? Or is what we're saying here is the work has begun on a project that we're looking to approve or being requested to approve here? Is that the issue here?
Do you want to speak on it? Or do you want me
I
to?
guess.
Well, that's exactly right, yes, but.
Well, you're not gonna get the approval tonight, so if that's.
No,
Yeah.
not the approval. What we're asking to do, what we're seeking to do is be able to take necessary steps to finish construction inside the building. So that, what there is as far as a possible harm, right, from, heavy snow, for example.
So Samuel's already granted that. To make the building secure and safe, and there's an email that was written to Sam about that.
Okay, and when did we obtain that? Do we know?
I know that you got it, actually.
November something, but in addition to
Do you
that
wanna see
structure.
it?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay,
In addition to that structural work, I guess,
Sam, can I just say one thing before you go on for a second? When it comes to the demo permit of the mobile home, that permit was issued and CO'd, so that's all done. I don't know if you knew that.
yeah,
So-
that was the first permit.
I just want to make sure that it's
There were
clear that
multiple
we're
permits
done with
issued for
that
this project, yes,
too.
Yeah.
The stop work order was placed on the renovation of the building,
correct.
not the mobile home, just so you're clear.
When you obtained that permit, well, no, not when, the question is, when you obtained that
Yeah.
permit? I haven't seen it. Did that include with it what you received to be?
No, the building permit.
Oh, the building.
No, no,
Sorry, sorry, can you-
I'm talking about the demolition permit.
Yeah.
When you got that, I haven't seen a copy of it. Did that include any other requirements placed upon you for that you've,
Not that I.
for
with-
erosion and
With the
sedimentation?
permit itself, not that I
Yeah.
specifically recall, but on the plot plan for that demo permit, we included an erosion and sediment control plan.
Which was approved by Joe.
And then in April, that was when we submitted a building permit for the renovations on the existing structure. And that was the permit we got issued and was revoked.
So a permit was issued?
Correct.
Was. Yeah, and so, the stop
Permit
work
was issued
order.
in April, by Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, just references essentially, blessing by the planning board and, that it is part of this broader process. And I know that in other municipalities and other projects, we've, in collaboration with the planning board and the CEO, been able to reach agreements where certain work was permitted to move forward so long as the applicants in good faith continued on with the planning board process and review. And here where we're not suggesting any significant changes to the property, right? There's no expansion of any buildings on premises. We're not, in any way modifying the property or what there might be for soil or erosion concerns. We would hope, quite frankly, it's almost, they're expecting that in the end, this will be positive, but if it isn't, then they're just throwing money into something that they may not be able to recoup in the end. But what we're hoping to do is to continue on with that build, that on that permit or on the basis of that permit that was previously issued and then later revoked. Understanding that we still need to continue on with this process. And I would hope that maybe we could reach an agreement here, where that would be allowed.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that another time. It doesn't really have anything to do with the planning board. If you want to reach out, I'd be happy to discuss that.
Are there any conditions that you might request or require for that? I mean, again, I just mentioned it because I stand to be corrected again
Sorry,
every
go
day.
ahead.
That I believe, the stop worker indicates that, the planning board approval is necessary. And so it just seems like the two are attached and I hate to like kind of leave it unspoken or not.
I see what you're
concluded.
saying.
Phil, can I ask you a question about the appropriateness? Typically in the past, you communicate with town staff. Would it be appropriate for the board to authorize me to communicate with you and town staff on this matter?
I will often also speak with the board chair of the planning board. Ultimately, whatever advice I give will need to be delivered to the entire board, obviously, and the applicants, everyone understands. But certainly we can have a conversation.
Let me kind of tell you, I give you an overview kind of on where I am. There's a permitting issue that needs to be worked out. There's a parking issue that needs to be worked out that perhaps has some gray area. There's an erosion and sedimentation control issue that needs to be addressed. there's this demolition permit, there's a building permit. You know, now you're asking. Can we forge ahead with the building permit, provided we're going through this process, but only the planning board can allow this to happen? No, I'm not, personally, I wouldn't be willing to do that, you know, right now. I'd like to, you know, and again, I'm willing to have more conversation. I can't make a motion and pass it. I would like, or a preference, perhaps a way of moving forward would be to, you know, table this particular application and, you know, to dot our i's and cross our t's and to authorize, you know, me to work with town staff or communicate with town staff and the attorney to find out more from the town's perspective. You know, the DEP permits, the FEMA permits, the demolition permits, the building permits. Where this parking is or not. And I'm a little lost.
We have two.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to. I need to think about it some more. So I would propose that this application be tabled right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's,
Forward with that. I mean, nothing's gonna happen today anyway, because we
Exactly.
could table it and say, go figure out the parking. So it's gonna be tabled either way.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay?
We just do a checklist of the things
Yeah.
that we need to do so that. we
I can't
have
give that
them
to you
done.
right now.
Yeah. Better,
I
yeah.
cannot give that to you right
Okay,
now,
why?
because I think there's these issues that need to be worked out, this permitting issue,
What is the permitting issue?
the DEP and FEMA. Do you have a FEMA permit?
That's why what is a FEMA permit?
Yeah.
It's the flood mapping, you know, it's the flood mapping that, you know, I know we touched on it earlier. A letter of map amendment being granted by FEMA. It's right here under this violation that you took issue with. And this DEP permit, the shoreline zone permit.
Yeah,
So it sounds like there's an issue going on there. So
The
we have
permit
to,
by rule. Is DEP?
yeah,
This
this
DEP, and that's for the scope. Let's read the scope. Basically, the before and after picture is everything that was done between them. That's what the permit by rule is pertaining to. Remove the old mobile home shed and deck from the lot, regrade area to be slightly sloped towards the brook. Install retaining wall at edge of existing upper paved area. Install 4-inch SDR pipe for gutter drains. See pictures. So that's the scope of that permit by rule. So there's nothing pertaining to the existing structure.
But you got that after
Correct.
you demoed it, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, but you demoed
So
everything.
it's
You
called
said
a-
earlier, yeah.
It's
The
called a
work was
permit,
done
by-
and
it's
then we
called a
did it.
permit by rule after.
I
the
understand
fact.
what those are.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand what
So-
those are.
But it's here.
Yeah.
So I guess. To say we got it late, so we need to stop. But what do you do to continue?
Right, but I think
You have
but the
it.
way I interpreted what you said is, oh, well, you know, we did it in the beginning, but we're not so sure we really have to do anything. I think that's the decision of the planning board as to whether or not we actually want you to go out. Let me rephrase that. It would appear to me that you're saying, because I got the permit by rule, because we did this, we're asking for a waiver so that we don't have to go and get a landscape architect or do any floral features planted. And what we're saying is, we're the ones to make that determination.
Sure,
And so I don't think anybody can argue with that. And
Yeah.
so,
so look, so I think we all
Yeah.
agree, and as you said, you know, we don't want to waste any more time
Yeah.
than we have to. Tabling it absolutely is necessary. It doesn't sound like anyone's gonna, you know, grant approval even to lift a stop work order or otherwise, you know, today. You meet once monthly, correct?
2 times.
2 times. So then could we ask that this be tabled and be placed on the agenda for the next meeting date? And that would give us essentially 2 weeks to establish whether or not this parking issue is something that the planning board can take up. And if it is, then great, then we can at least establish that on the record and we can, you know, maybe speak to some other requirements and allow us opportunity to provide some more information. And if it isn't something then the planning board can deal with, then we know very quickly here that we need to just put a stop on this, full stop, and go to the ZBA before we come back to you.
I think in addition to that, maybe obviously seeing the email that Jenny has,
Well, that would be, yeah, important.
So I would just like to talk with the attorney about this parking thing and this major versus minor site plan. I don't share your interpretation, but it's not to say there's not something else in there that would prevent that. And so is there, Phil, I noticed you came unmuted. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'm sorry. I'll remute myself.
Would that be a reasonable path forward at this point? Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and happy to jump right in on it and help out.
I guess one more thing, looking for anything else, right? Is to what extent Lee J, his involvement is still necessary here. I mean, he provided a third-party independent review of the initial application. He's provided that initial feedback. Is it still necessary that he participate and continue to provide repeated updates? Or do we feel as though the third-party evaluation and role to this point has been served its purpose? And
yeah, I'm not prepared to bring that to a close. I do anticipate probably us and me and others probably having some continued questions about the document before us. But I think as far as asking him to weigh in on proposed courses of action, I don't think would be appropriate to ask him at this point in time, moving forward. So
yeah, I didn't mean that. I just
think-
meant,
Yeah, I think he's limited. If I have questions or the board members have questions on this, then I think we can ask him questions, but asking him to go and go beyond the scope of what we asked him, I think would be inappropriate. That's not to say at a future point in time, we may not want him under a different capacity to weigh in on what would be presented. One of the things that said we hope for a table to motion, it may be somewhere here, you withdraw and start over. Maybe a cleaner method moving forward, but that's up for discussion down the road. And, you might consider talking to the attorney, the town's attorney at some point as we work our way through this. Could be wrong, it's just my thought, but sometimes it may be easier to maybe clean some of the stuff up moving forward. So just something to think about. Anyway, so I would entertain a motion to table this and let's work out, get us some more information pertaining to these permits or lack thereof. I want to have some, the erosion and control, while we talk about that, we're not going to waive that. These permitting issues and the bigger issue is the parking. We really need to kind of hammer that down.
What are the permitting issues?
Again,
and there may not be any.
They may not,
So we're just
yeah,
gonna-
yeah. Again, part of our process is we're gonna say to you, show us the permits, right, from DEP. You say you have it right here, but now it appears there's an issue with that.
And FEMA.
And
I would like to think that it's all taken care of. You did the work, but.
yeah.
Can I say
We'll look into that.
one more thing related to permitting, just because I think it's interesting. If we were to have come here with an application and we hadn't done anything on the site, we would not go for those permits until after your approval.
No, not necessarily. I think we can require them ahead of time. I think the ordinance might say you have to provide those ahead of time. I'd have to go look.
Regardless.
Regardless,
It's something to be
yeah,
addressed.
right,
and
that's right. It
considered.
doesn't matter
And
at this
We're
point.
asking to be
Yeah.
placed on the agenda 2 weeks from now. So if nothing else, we can definitively establish whether or not the parking is something the planning board can take on.
Also,
Yeah.
just one more comment as well, like, in terms of not understanding the permits, I thought that was sort of the reason that we involved a third party to be a guide to walk us through what permitting we need, what are the next steps we need.
It was independent, this was an independent review. It wasn't acting on anyone's behalf.
So it was just an independent
Yeah,
review of only
Look at the information
application.
before you and tell us the problems. It did give us a path forward on some of the stuff. Regarding the parking, stuff like that, we need to figure that out. The erosion sedimentation control, so it's not like it was not for nothing. Did answer a lot of those questions, so is there a motion to table and, we can place this on the next one and I'm assuming we'll communicate with you. If we have sufficient information at that time to move that forward.
Yeah, I'm sure Phil and I will touch base on it and, and again, we'll figure out the parking and yeah, I'm certainly interested to see whatever new information there is.
So moved.
Moved, second. Any conversation? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And let's go back to the agenda. Do we have anything else? Well, you know what? I did tell people that were attending the public if there's any comments, and so I'll go back and ask if there's any comments on this particular application from people in the audience. I don't see anybody on Zoom. People are attending, so they can have a few minutes if they'd like. Seeing none, are there any member comments? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, so moved.
Move, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Greg still has it. Right over.
What?
Thank you all.